So today we'll start by talking about our project one and some context in which that project is framed. So first off, we want to talk about what is a collage and the history of collages, since we'll be making some digital collages of our own. So we can think about a collage as an assemblage of different forms creating a new whole. And the new whole part is what's really important here when we're thinking about kind of sampling and remix within music, specifically thinking about kind of a hip hop music. You're taking all these little chunks and little bits of different genres, different artists, different songs, and you're mixing and mashing them up together into an entirely new experience that has like your own personal inspiration and touch added on top of that. And so it no longer becomes about kind of being able to understand the parts as individuals, but about how they connect to create a new concept or a new meaning when you take all these disparate things and put them together. In French, collage means to glue or stick together, and we can also think about Pablo Picasso's collaging technique in which he was applying paper to a flat surface like wood or canvas. We can think about different artist movements throughout time and how they use collage. So thinking about it as an opportunity to protest societal values or to support new ideological processes and world orders, or to think about ways of interrogating the subconscious, or to directly incorporate elements of popular culture into your artwork. And so thinking about how each of these movements was combining collage as a way of looking about their own personal positioning within kind of society and the ideology of their culture. And so really thinking about, is this a moment in which to work against the social norms or to support the social norms or to provide an alternative to the social norms? And so really each time that you see collage being an art form that gains traction, it's really about culture. It's about connecting artistic imagery and message to regular everyday imagery that you might see in advertising or like posters or signage, and just seeing how you can connect that to a metaphor. So really thinking here are a couple quotes from artists about specifically collage filling that void between art and life, that this becomes the connective tissue between how we think about contemporary art in any time and life. What separates those two, right? There's images that exist outside art, specifically thinking about the kind of situation we're in now, right? With Instagram, social media, and YouTube and the internet, that there are images outside of art. And so how can you start to integrate that imagery into art? So here are I wanted to show you all a couple of different examples of artists who use collage, both kind of in a historical context and a contemporary context. So here there's a lot of imagery pulled from books and publications, and it's mainly monochrome. It goes from like these warm oranges to these blues, but it's mainly kind of black and white. I'm really thinking here that there's no central focal point. There's lots of different scales and depths of field, and it feels a little chaotic, right? And then we can think about Robert Rauschenberg using collage, but his collage is not necessarily just being two-dimensional, but always using found objects. So here we see kind of a leg from a table, or maybe that is a railing. We see different types of cloth, we see different types of wood, and so these are all found materials being collaged together to create a new meaning. This is one of my favorites. Just What Is It That Makes Today's Home So Different, So Appealing, by Richard Hamilton. This piece was created in the 50s, and I feel like it's got a very certain era about it, right? It's right around the time when they started trying to build the technology to go to the moon. So we see that these planets, right? The moon makes an appearance above. But it was also a big time for thinking about kind of home ownership and material goods in America. And so each one of these elements in here has actually been traced to its original source material. And so you've got up here the moon, right? That's one source material. This is from the earliest talkie films. So that's another one. This is all one. This floor is part of the same advertisement. This man is one. I doubt he was really holding a Tootsie Roll Pop. So this is probably another image. This is another image. This is another. This woman here is another. The TV is another. I believe the image on the TV is a separate image, right? And so there's so many different source materials here, but somehow this thing is making a comment about the contemporary society of the time. You know, even now I think we can look at this and see some of those comments or some of those ideas or some of the metaphors that he's trying to build through this story. Kara Walker is a contemporary artist who started out by making a lot of collages, and so here are a couple of hers. All of her subject matter has to do with slavery and the transatlantic slave trade and how that affects contemporary society today. And so here she's using these historical documents about the slave trade and then collaging on top of that more contemporary materials that also have to do with race. And so really thinking about how she's confusing here kind of the background, and then we have this woman, and then we have this imagery right here, and then this imagery right here. And so really thinking about kind of the violence and more of the slave trade through these quite simple collages. Here, Martha Rosler is another contemporary artist who's working in collage, who often deals with ideas of kind of like the American dream and war and violence. So here we see American soldiers in the background. This woman here is crying on supposedly this woman's porch. Inside of this beautiful house, we have this like $8,000 chair, right? And she's wearing this beautiful gown. And so thinking about how these disparate elements start to really tell a story and become a new concept through their kind of combinations. They tell a different story than they would on their own, which I think is really important to this idea of becoming a new whole. So then we can think about kind of three-dimensional collages and thinking about this idea of elevating ordinary objects through choices of the artist. Here's another list of types of ready-mades. And we can think about Marcel Duchamp, who was the kind of the father figure of the ready-made. And here we have the bicycle wheel made in 1913, which is considered the first ready-made, but also the first kinetic sculpture. And so thinking about how he's taken away the use of each of these objects, the functionality of them through his new invention, and thus created a new work of art that asks us to really question the context in which either of these things existed previously. Another one here by Man Ray is an example of using a singular object in repetition to start to get us to question the form. Louise Nevelson often uses everyday found materials. So here we can see we've got some chair railings here. This looks like a table leg here. Right, here's a window. So she's using these everyday typical objects that like we all have seen a million times. And then she starts to assemble these into spaces, voids, volumes, textures, and she coats everything in the same color and creates a monochrome piece that then becomes seen purely as texture and form and not so much as these independent individual objects, which I think really goes with the idea of thinking about collage. And then Betty Saar, who's using found materials and combining them to tell new stories. And so she creates these like shadow boxes with these different figurines and things within them So here we can see that this statue is one object. Then we've got some what looks like cotton down here, and then we've got the Aunt Jemima background. And so really thinking about how the combination of all these objects might start to tell us a new story. So then I was trying to think about what I think the contemporary condition, or like what the collage of the contemporary condition is. And I think really that goes to this idea of the deep fake, which you guys may know more about than I do, but it's kind of like when a person uses an existing image or an existing video and replaces the person in it with another person, or maybe changes what that person is saying or the context in which they're saying it. And so faking content isn't necessarily new, but what makes this a deep fake versus faking content is perhaps using techniques of machine learning and artificial intelligence, specifically when it comes to our audio-visual content. We've been editing photos for decades, right? And so then really thinking like, what's the next photo editing kind of move? And I think that goes into video and audio editing as technology improves. And so deepfakes have gotten a lot of attention, from pornographic videos to fake news to hoaxes and financial fraud. So this one I think is particularly interesting. If we go to the beginning of it, So at the beginning of this piece here, let me see if I can, it won't let me. Oh, here, we'll just click here and we'll go here. So this is a PSA that was put out about fake news. And when you watch it, it seems like it's President Obama talking to you. And we hear him, we see him, right? We've been known to trust what we see and what we hear. And he's continuing to, in this PSA, to talk about the idea of deepfakes, right? He continues to talk. It looks like a total boring video until you realize about halfway through, when it cuts to the screen, that it's actually Jordan Peele delivering this message, right? And that through technological innovations and artificial intelligence, they have then taken Jordan Peele's voice, put it through a voice modulator, and it comes out sounding like Barack Obama. And then they're able to mimic the way Barack Obama's lips and hand gestures would move, so this becomes a believable video about Obama. I encourage you all to check that out in your own time after this project. We can also think about kind of face swap as a deep fake, right? Or as a contemporary collage of switching our faces. And then this project is particularly exciting. I really like this one. This project is by an Italian artist, and it's an artwork that you can see at exhibitions, like at an art fair or in gallery. And it's basically about a time-traveling movie star from the 60s who comes to the contemporary era, and then is able, and then kind of engages with Roger Moore and Kendall Jenner. And so he only uses video and audio and photographs that are found in kind of like pop culture, and then reproduces this entire narrative around it. And so it doesn't actually star Ornella Muti or Kendall Jenner or Roger Moore, but these are all just like clips found on YouTube that then have been edited even further. And so it is playing with the aesthetics of Instagram and using artificial intelligence to create this new video. And so I really encourage you all to check it out. You can see there's a clip of it here. We'll turn this down.
Cosa fai? Cosa fai?
And so this is the like trailer for the video, but I really encourage you all to look through it. It's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a really interesting use of thinking, or way of thinking about deep fakes. Once again, here's another example from the academic world. Apparently, they're all of Obama, but this one is actually an academic paper produced by some scientists that was then presented at a conference about trying to reproduce the way we think about how Obama
saved
talks.
many lives.
So they analyzed the original voice or the original kind of video of Obama talking and acting and how he moves his mouth, his pauses, his facial expressions. And then what they are able to
And
do
we won't let up.
is then create their
Here we compare to
own.
Bees et al., who used the ground-tooth mouth region to drive the animation on the left.
It's been less than a
And
week
then they create
since the
their
deadliest
own
mass
kind of,
shooting in American history.
Note that our
version
method
over here of this project. And so here you can see how they're analyzing just his mouth, right? And then they're able to import it over it. And so I encourage you to watch this video as well. I think it's super fascinating to think about how we're able to now create new digital content, but also kind of the dangers around this. We're able to retell history through this way, or change history, or manipulate people's perception of events, right? Which brings us to our project personally. So digital collage is our first project. It will be due on the 20th of May, so that's in just over a week. And basically this project is asking students to build on the history of found objects within art to produce a new, unique work of art. So once again, thinking, how can we take or sample things from the past and remix it into something new? So we're going to think about the history of the ready-made, photo collage, and deep fakes to explore ways of building upon and referencing precedents. So you're going to sample the digital archives of the Smithsonian, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the British Museum to produce a remixed work of art that responds to the original samples in which original context in which the samples were produced. So what you'll be doing is finding images of objects or photographs or drawings through the digital archives of both the Smithsonian, the Metropolitan Museum, and the British Museum. And you might want to read a little bit about that object or find out something about the history of it and think about how that history could be then retold or reimagined through your collage. How is your collage commenting on the contemporary era, but also thinking about kind of the historical context in which you're working? So you're asked to consider the role of image in contemporary culture, right? Especially given the recent stay-at-home orders, a lot of our connection to the outside world is through digital images and digital content, which we have talked about so far as being easily able for us to fake. How do we trust what we're seeing? How do we know what's real? Is it important that we know what's real? Is it just important that we don't trust anything? And then how is our understanding, and then thinking about how our understanding of events or image or culture may shift depending on the context it's presented, right? If I hear Jordan Peele with Obama's voice, I'm probably not going to take it so seriously as if I see Obama in the Oval Office, right? And as you go through this process and you're taking images, you're taking reference images from these digital archives, I want you to really think about whether you consider the content you're producing as a rewriting of history or an alternative perspective on history, or whether you're creating a new history or a new future. So create a work that incorporates the techniques and programs that we'll cover next class with the content of these images. So I want you to really think about what the content you're using means. Not just is this pretty, but we want to be able to get some kind of meaning out of the combination of materials, similar to like Richard Hamilton's What Is It Exactly About the Home That's So Appealing project. So today we've done the intro to the project, the history of the ready-made, and we're going to talk briefly about the digital archives here in a second. And then next class we're going to talk about Photoshop, And there will be opportunities. If you'd like to talk individually, please send me an email. Let's set up a time to meet. And then on May 18th, we're going to do a in-progress critique. So at that point, you should be maybe halfway done with your project. We'll also start thinking about artist statements. And then on the 20th, we'll have our first project due and our artist statements due, and we'll have our first critique. So it'll be pretty quick. So some things to remember as we move forward, right? The more reference materials you have, the better your project is going to be. So really thinking about complexity and layering. Concept is really important. When we're using referenced images, we need to know why we're using them, and we need to be able to articulate an overall message through our art. We're not just looking for pretty objects, we're looking for content and meaning behind those pretty objects. We want to think about how your arrangement and how the history of these objects or these reference materials are reinforcing your concept. Once again, this is also a technical class, right? So we're learning new skills, and you need to be able to prove that you have practiced and really raised your game in terms of these skills. So we really want to be thinking about craft, right? We're only going to be using reversible processes so that we don't destroy any images. And then once again, I'm going to repeat myself a million times throughout this whole class, but complexity and multiple found images will help create lots of digital layers and metaphorical layers, resulting in an overall better product. So that is our kind of intro to this next project. One thing that I wanted to show you all before the end of class is if we go over here to project 1 and we go to demo videos, I'm going to show you a little bit about the digital collections. Basically, if you follow those links, this is such a bad, okay, let's see if I can find a better one. Okay, I'm just going to show you this by going here. So if you click on these links, they'll take you to the different archives, the digital archives of each of these kind of museums. And I really wanted to show you a little bit about how they work, kind of briefly, and get you kind of started exploring. Because I really feel like you should spend the night exploring these and really digging in deep to these collections, because there's so much content here. It can be really challenging to kind of sort through and really understand what's going on. You can also watch these videos here to figure out how to search them, how to find things, and then how to save them and rename them by watching 1, 2, and 3. 4 through 12 will be covered tomorrow. So if we're in the digital collections and I click on kind of the artist and art files, and then I'm going to type in here wallpaper, right? And then it's going to tell me that there is no wallpaper, but I've been to the Smithsonian. I know they have it. So I'm going to look over here in the selected collections related to art and design, and I'm going to go to drawings. And here it says design wallpaper. So sometimes it's not going to seem as logical as it should, but they do have such a ridiculous amount of materials that sometimes you might just not be using the right search terms. So here you'll notice that some of these have these icons next to them, and some of them don't. And that's because some of them are available for anyone to use and some of them aren't. So we go here to the ornamented stripes, right? We can only download the metadata. We can't actually download the whole image. But if we go back here and we click on one right here with the CC on the circle, and then we wait for it to load, you'll notice that this means Creative Commons, right? So Creative Commons means that it's open to anyone to use whenever they want. And so if we go here, we can download a high resolution JPEG of it, which will be really important, right? We need the high resolution if we're going to make a good quality product. So you'll go ahead and you'll click there and you can download it. Another thing that I wanted to show you is in the collection of the British Museum, here you can type in any word you want and then it will show you what those are. So if we click in, if we type Roman, right? That's a pretty broad term, right? It can mean so much. So now anything or everything will come up that has the keyword Roman at any point in its kind of description, right? So here we have so much different type of material. So I really want to narrow this down. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click where it says technique. And I'm going to say that I want only engraved things. So I'm going to click there and then I'm going to click done. And it's going to narrow it down for a little bit. And then I can go to material and I can choose, do I want a gemstone? Do I want bronze? And I'm going to go ahead and click on gold. And then I'm going to close this and you'll see that it's bringing up a couple different options, right? And then I can go here and I can go to object name and it's going to tell me what is it, you know? And it will tell me how many different objects there are within this. So I'm going to click on finger ring and then I'm going to press done. And it's going to bring me up all the Roman engraved gold finger rings that they have in their collection, which is perhaps more than enough finger rings, right? So then if we click on one of these, we'll notice here that we have that same C, right? And then if we go to use this image is released to you under the Creative Commons, right? That means we are allowed to use this image. So then we can go ahead and we can press download and you'll notice that it downloads here. So over the between now and tomorrow when we meet once again, I really encourage you all to look through and really start digging into these archives. They can be a little bit daunting because there's so much information, but as you really get in there and start to figure it out, it will make a lot more sense. And I think you'll start to understand kind of the logic of the sorting system. So if you have any questions or concerns, please send me an email and I'll see you all tomorrow.